Okay, I'm now going to introduce our presenter. Once again, I'm going to remind you to hold your questions until I invite you to ask them. Chief Averiett is a Bay Area native and started her career in law enforcement more than 25 years ago. She looks far too young to have been 25 years doing anything, but that's what she says. She previously served as deputy chief of the Progressive Policing and Community Engagement Bureau at BART Police Department. Prior to BART, Chief Averiett worked for the police department for the city of Hayward, leaving there in 2019 at the rank of lieutenant, and served as a deputy sheriff for Alameda County Sheriff's Office. Chief Averett's varied experience includes assignments in patrol, San Francisco area zone commander, community policing, internal affairs, gang unit, traffic, DA liaison, and support and honor guard. Chief Averiett received her BA from St. Mary's College of California in Leadership and Organizational Studies. She has also participated in many leadership courses to include the Alameda County Leadership Academy and LAPD Leadership. Is that Los Angeles?
Yes, at the time that I wrote this, I didn't realize that I was going to be working also at LAPD. We're LAPD North. This is the LAPD South.
Yes, and this is the small LAPD. Chief Averiett has extensive experience in community outreach, and as such, she thrives on tackling complex problems facing law enforcement agencies. The bulk of her professional career has been dedicated to grassroots efforts to fortify community policing strategies and engagement. As such, Chief Averiett currently serves on the board of directors of the Barbershop Forum, an organization comprised of law enforcement, community activists, and returning citizens that works to bridge the communication and trust gap that exists between law enforcement and the community. This groundbreaking collaboration has been in existence since 2016 and has twice been nominated for an Emmy Award stemming from televised barbershop forums that capture the rawness of intense conversations between law enforcement and the communities they serve. I will also mention at this point, since you brought up the Emmy, that Chief Averiett is an actress and producer when she's not a law enforcement officer, and a member of Screen Actors Guild and American Federation of Television and Radio Actors. Right? Is that right? Okay. So maybe we'll find out later more about what she likes to do when she has a little bit of spare time. It's through this important community-focused work that Chief Averiett and the members of the forum received the Nancy's Hero Award from Alameda County District Attorney Nancy O'Malley in 2017. And I believe she's retiring, and there will be a new DA in Alameda County after the election next week. And Chief Averiett has also received an NAACP Community Service Award in 2019, among many other accolades. Chief Averiett is currently serving as the president of the California Association of Hostage Negotiators, following a long career as a crisis negotiator. In addition, she serves as a member of the planning committee for the Women Leaders in Law Enforcement, and previously served as the parliamentarian of the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. In 2020, Angela was selected to be one of 11 subject matter experts invited by California Peace Officers Standards and Training to serve on a committee tasked with drafting use of force guidelines for all law enforcement agencies in the state of California. She and her husband have been married for almost 30 years and have 2 adult children and 1 grandchild. So with that introduction, over to you, Angela, for a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Marie. And to everyone on the Zoom meeting today, I'm sorry that you had to learn so much about me. was a long bio. I'm sorry. But now I think you You know everything you ever needed to know about me, probably. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I'm excited to have this conversation. As Marie mentioned, I've spent pretty much all of my career um, being involved with the community. Community engagement has been extremely important to me, mostly because growing up, I didn't see police officers that looked like me. I also had some negative experiences with the police. And so, in my mind, the best way to affect change was to be the change from within. And that's one of the many things that started me on this law enforcement journey. Being a chief has been really exciting, stressful, rewarding. It's given me lots of anxiety in a good way. But one of the things that I love is um, I went from having one boss to having over 30,000 bosses. And so I really love the community of Los Altos. It's been a great transition. And in my short 4 months that I've been here, I've learned so much about the community, so much about the organization, so much about the city leadership that has really impressed me and inspired me to keep pushing and keep moving the needle forward. So again, thank you so much for having me here. And I'm looking forward to answering any and all questions that you may have for me.
Thank you so much for that, for those remarks, Angela. And now I'm going to ask you a few questions before we open it up to the participants for their questions. Can you please explain your philosophy of community policing?
Yes. So to me, community policing is a collaboration or partnership between law enforcement and the community. A lot of times when people describe this situation, they say law enforcement or the community. It's really law enforcement and the community. Law enforcement is the community and the community is law enforcement. We must work together to solve complex issues in our communities. And it's not just about crime. It's about blight. It's about, making sure our streets are safe for our kids to walk to and from school. It's about traffic safety. It's a multifaceted approach to working with our communities to improve the quality of life for all. But more importantly, it's about us getting to know each other. That's what really humanizes the badge. And there have been police officers who have tarnished this badge. There's no doubt about it. We have some bad actors in law enforcement that we must, weed out and get rid of. But the overwhelming majority of people that do this job because they have a heart of service and they really want to serve their communities. They really are interested, excuse me, in helping people, and not just helping people, but helping people to thrive. We don't want to just live. We want people to thrive. And so the way that we do that is by serving with compassion, doing the best that we can to help people not be victimized, but also to follow through and do the best investigations that we can when a crime does happen, so that we can bring some justice, some form of justice to those who have been affected by crime. So it's really about all of us working together towards a common goal.
Thank you for that very thorough answer. So you've been on the job now, as you said, almost 4 months, well, 3+ months.
Yeah.
And we're curious to know what your opinion is about the need for a new police station. Have you formed an opinion in your time here so far?
Yeah, so let me just say that I don't want to come across as like being negative or bashing what our current facility looks like or the condition of our facility. When I worked at BART, I literally, one of my first days there, I changed in a janitor's closet at the Concord station because they hadn't built out a substation. And so they found this little cubby in a parking garage. And I literally had like the mop sink next to me as I'm putting on my uniform. So I've had some pretty interesting office spaces, let's say. So this is definitely not the worst I've had. But what I will say is that this building definitely is aging. We're kind of holding it together with duct tape right now. There's only so much that paint and new carpet can do. And, my biggest concern is there asbestos or lead in some of the paint? I don't know that. I just know that this building, I guess, was built in the 60s. And, this city is expanding. And I have no doubt that in the future, our police department will expand in order to meet the needs of the community. And so I really think that having a facility that reflects our community and is maybe a little more updated would really help to increase the internal morale. It will let our employees feel even more proud to work in this city. So the long answer to your short question is yes, I do believe that we need a new police facility.
And it recently rained, and we hear that there's some leaks and possibly even some flooding. Did you experience that during this recent little mini storm?
Well, knock on wood, this last rain, we didn't have any flooding, but we do have like a basement area and we've had to put some files like up on crates. So if and when it does flood again, we don't, our files don't get damaged. I'm curious to see what happens next week because we have a big storm coming on Monday. So I'll come back next month and let you know.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what attracted you to Los Altos? And if you've developed goals in your short time here for your first year, could you share them with us?
Absolutely. So there were two things that attracted me to Los Altos. The first thing was the department itself. Obviously Los Altos is the smallest department I've worked at. My entire bureau at BART was slightly larger than my whole department. So that was a big change, but I was attracted to a smaller department because I realized that the challenges here were going to be different than the challenges are working at a larger agency. And for me, I'm a problem solver. I love tackling, kind of complex issues. It gives me a great sense of purpose. And so I knew that internally, there were some issues that I could help work on. But externally, what I really loved was the fact that this community really supports its law enforcement. This community is very clean and green and very concerned about the environment. But also I love the sense of community that we have here. I was so honored last Friday. I got to be the lead car in the high school homecoming parade. And I had never done anything like that before. And I actually got emotional when we turned onto Main Street because I saw people like lined up and cheering. And I don't know what I was expecting, but it just gave me such a sense of pride to have that kind of small town community feel. And so, once I started doing my research on this community, I just knew that this was going to be a good fit for me. And I was hoping that I was going to be a good fit for the community. I also was interested in bringing my diversity to this city, not only in my gender and my race, but also a diversity of thought. I just feel like I had a lot to bring to the table, and it was, really a great decision. Now, as far as what some of my goals are, internally, some of my goals include improving internal communication and transparency, because that really starts within. And if I don't have that transparency within my organization, then I'm not going to have it out in the community. We really need to update some of our technology. We're in the heart of Silicon Valley, and we have a lot more that we can do to kind of bring our officers and staff, current, and help us be more efficient in doing our jobs. But also, what's really important to me is increasing our training. Well-trained police officers translate into more professional police officers. And so I want to ensure that our officers are getting the training that they need to help address, evolving events happening in society. Externally, there are a couple of things that may be controversial that I am working on, but that I 100% believe in. One of those things is bringing the school resource officer back into our schools. It's a valuable resource, And it's one that I think has been missing for a couple of years. So I'm very interested in restarting that program. I also am taking a hard look at our officers responding to gas-powered leaf blower complaints. And I'll just be very frank with all of you. Every contact that we make as police officers, we have to fill out what's called a RIPA form. That's the Racial Identity and Profiling Act of, I think it was 2015. And on that RIPA form, we have to collect data about race, perceived race, age, gender, things like that. There are 16 data sets that we have to report on. I feel like our officers responding to those types of calls really skews our RIPA data. I feel like we are targeting a segment of the population unfairly because of that ordinance. And I don't think that our police officers should be responding to what is a municipal code violation. Those complaints should be responded to by our code enforcement officer. So that's one thing I'm looking into right now. I also want to increase our community engagement social media platforms, which we're in the process of doing now. I plan to begin hosting virtual town hall meetings to bring the community in to ask questions similar to what we're doing today, but also to provide information. And then lastly, next year, I would like to maybe late spring, early summer, I would like to host an open house at the police department so that the community can come here, meet our officers, tour our facility, maybe have a bike rodeo and a safety, bike safety class. I also threw around the idea of maybe having a chief dunk tank, but I don't know, I have to really think about that one. But I want to make it a fun event to bring our community here and be more transparent so everyone can see what we're doing.
Thank you for that. And I think there was during the ALS challenge, I believe the police chief at the time participated in that in a dunk thing. So just do it when it's warm, not
exactly
if you're going to do it. Yeah. So you talked about, how this is the smallest department you've worked in. Is there anything more you want to say about what it's been like moving from a large police department, most recently at BART, to the much smaller Los Altos Police Department?
The biggest difference is a lack of resources. Staffing is an issue for probably every police department across the country right now. And when you're in a smaller place, even one vacancy can have a ripple effect on the whole organization. And so we're taking a close look at our recruitment strategies and trying to update those to attract qualified candidates to come here and work. But really what it requires is that every single person in the organization has to take a piece of the pie. We don't have bureaus and divisions that can, take on certain problems or certain tasks. And so we all have to be actively engaged in the work of police work. So to give you an example, I recently formed some subcommittees within the police department, and not just of sworn officers, but also of our professional staff. So that includes a building committee to take a look at our facility and how we can improve it, the social media committee, and a recruitment team, among others. And so we had volunteers from different ranks and job classifications come together because I think the best brain power is really in the building. I don't have all the answers. And so I want our employees to feel like they are part of the process. So just kind of reallocating the existing resources that I do have has been a challenge, and that's been the biggest difference coming from a big agency.
Okay, thank you. What can you tell us about crime in Los Altos? We, especially on Nextdoor, there's a lot of stuff about, it seems like crime is increasing, and I've read, in other cities too, there's concern about this. Do you have statistics you can share? Is it a phenomenon of social media? Just we know about more, and we have more ways to tell others about what's going on? Or is there a real increase in crime? What do you have statistically to share with us?
I'll be honest, I don't have any particular statistics to share with you right now. What I can tell you is Bay Area wide, we have seen an increase in crime. Now, as far as Los Altos is concerned, I haven't taken a look at what the crime stats were before I got here, but some of the issues, the top issues in crime that we're facing right now, include catalytic converter thefts, which is not unique to Los Altos, obviously, and home burglaries. Home and commercial burglaries actually are kind of our 1 and 2 top tier crimes. We are fortunate, knock on wood, that we haven't had a lot of violent crime, and that continues to stay low, and I want to keep it that way. But we as a police department have to continue to be more proactive, in preventing crime. And so earlier when I talked about technology, technology can really help us kind of keep ahead of some of the crime trends. And it's a force multiplier. So, let's say we only have a couple of officers available to patrol our streets. Having things like, cameras, license plate reader cameras in our community could help us, deter crime or even to solve crime after it's happened.
Okay, thank you. What do you see as some of the key law enforcement issues or problems in Los Altos?
I think maybe because this community has been fortunate to not really have not really have a ton of crime, right? Like some other cities around us. I think sometimes people get complacent. And so people, sometimes are careless and they leave things out in the open. Like sometimes people leave their cars unlocked or leave the keys in the car so their car gets stolen. People leave laptops, in plain view and their cars get broken into. So those kind of crimes happen everywhere. It doesn't matter where you live, even in gated communities, sometimes those things happen. And so as far as a law enforcement issue, I would say that, as we enter this holiday season, I just want to remind everyone to be safe and to be aware of your surroundings, but make sure that you don't entice criminals to come look at your car because you have Christmas presents on the back seat, or even when you have packages delivered. This is like the season for stealing packages. And so, if you can get your packages delivered to like an Amazon hub or something like that, or if you're going to be home to receive the package, that would be preferable. But, this is when I talk about community policing and all of us working together towards a common goal. We can do our part in law enforcement, but I need everyone to do their part also, to help themselves not become victims of crime.
Okay, so let's just make sure we don't blame the victim because.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I'm not victim blaming at all. I'm merely saying as a reminder that people should think about where they place valuable items in their vehicles, because that is like, honey, like to a bee for people that want to steal stuff.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. Well, I mentioned SR school resource officers earlier. And so what do you see as, I think there, as you probably know, there was a task force that looked at the issue carefully, and it included both city employees and members of the community. And they concluded that we shouldn't have them. So what do you see as the benefits of having school police officers on campus at the high schools?
I think there are a lot of benefits, and I'll just say kudos to Janine. I know that she was on that task force, and I understand why the decision was made at the time that it was made. But in my opinion, I feel like the benefits of having a school resource or school liaison officer is there are many benefits to it. The school resource officer's job is not enforcement. their job is not to take people to jail. It's quite the opposite. They really work to be mentors, um, almost guidance counselors, confidants. Um, but also, in my opinion, I feel like they are liaisons for the police department to help us bridge that communication gap and to take the stigma away from people who feel like police officers are all bad, or that we, don't have people's best interests at heart. And so it really starts, I think, in our elementary and junior high schools in developing those relationships with our children, so that they see police officers as a source of safety and security and not as the enemy. And then in our high schools, actually, I know that many school resource officers have been successful in thwarting violence, because they built those positive relationships with the students, who then feel comfortable coming to them to say, hey, so and so may have brought a knife or a gun to school today. You should check on them. Um, and I know for a fact that that has stopped, thankfully, some violence in our schools. And speaking of violence in our schools, that's another area that I think having a school resource officer would benefit. God forbid that we ever have anything happen like that in our community. And I'm not saying that, if it did happen, that the officer would be on campus at the time that it happens. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, if there's even a small possibility that we would have an officer in the area or on the campus, if there was something like that to happen, our number one priority is keeping our students safe, also keeping the staff at the school safe. And so obviously safety is a huge component of the school resource officer's position.
Yeah. Well, I think a large part of the reason the city council came to the decision that it did was because a number of students of color at the campus didn't feel comfortable with those officers. So you mentioned the need for training. Is this one area where extra training might be helpful, so that how to develop a relationship? You think it would be sort of basic, but maybe it's not. And maybe it's different if you're in a uniform, as opposed to, just walking, just a regular person.
Yeah, so definitely training comes into play in this situation. Obviously I'm a woman of color, so I'm sensitive to those students of color who felt unsafe or uncomfortable with the officer on the campus. And I think that starts with having dialogue and communication. When I said earlier, we need to get to know each other, I really meant that. Like, I need to know your name. You need to know my name. We need to know about each other, because that brings us together as human beings. And it's no different with our students. But I also think the important thing about a school resource officer is that it has to be the right fit. There are many different personalities in law enforcement. Some officers are very tactical and they want to be on the SWAT team. Some people like me love to talk to people, so we become negotiators. And some people really enjoy engaging with our youth and want to be school resource officers. Some officers want to ride motorcycles. So it's really about finding the right kind of officer to put in our schools.
Okay, thank you. So related to this last little bit of conversation that we're having, what are your thoughts about increasing diversity in the police department? Would that help also with the school resource officer situation and just generally?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's something to be said about having a diverse police department, because, as I stated earlier, I didn't see anyone that looked like me as a police officer growing up, right? Somehow I ended up in this profession, thankfully, but I think it makes people feel comfortable sometimes when they see someone that looks like them. I think it also brings, you know, um, diverse perspective to the table. I'm definitely interested in bringing more diversity to the organization. It's difficult because we are a small city, so it's difficult to compete with some of our surrounding agencies as it relates to recruiting. But I think being thoughtful and highlighting the wonderfulness of Los Altos is really going to help us diversify this department. And I had given a speech a couple years back about people in our community. We make up this fabric, right? And it takes all of us as little threads to come together to make up this fabric. And how amazing is it to have different color threads in the fabric, right? I think it just brings a richness to our community. I think diversity is important.
Okay, thank you. And last question from me before we open it up to the participants is, what do you see as the police role in dealing with crime and mental illness? There's been a lot of talk lately about this particular subject, so we're interested in hearing your views.
Yeah, that's a very complex issue, honestly. For many, many, many years, law enforcement had to deal with this on our own. We weren't provided really any training. We really learned everything on the job, whether that was good or bad. I don't know, but we didn't have the resources we needed in order to deal properly with people that were experiencing traumas and crisis and mental illness. I think, when I worked at BART, I started up the Progressive Policing and Community Engagement Bureau. And the number one thing that I had to tackle was building out a program, a co-responder program of pairing officers with mental health professionals to respond to people in crisis, to people who were drug addicted, and to individuals experiencing homelessness. And so it was super complex. It was very difficult, super hard. There wasn't really a playbook at that time on how to do that. But what I can tell you is I think we do have a role because, we have a role when we are trained. It goes back to training. We must be properly trained on how to de-escalate situations, how to have crisis intervention skills, how to understand when someone is having a mental crisis, what that looks like, right? And I think by doing so, it not only reduces our use of force, but I think it also helps us to help those individuals long term. I will say one of the issues of that, though, is the extreme frustration with how siloed mental health services are and how difficult it is for law enforcement to access those services for people. So that was one of the positive things in having our officers paired with mental health workers, is that they had access to the resources, right? And when I talk about getting long-term help for individuals, I actually have a personal friend whose brother is going through this exact thing right now. He had a mental health break, and over the summer he got arrested 10 to 15 times for various things. And so I'm trying to work with her to get him some help. He's in jail right now, but what help can I get him before he's released back out into the community? A lot of people who are undergoing mental health crises don't have a support system. They don't have the resources to access. And so I'm sorry if this is a long answer. It's something I'm very passionate about, but I do feel like there's a place for law enforcement. However, I feel like it has to be in collaboration with mental health workers or county of the Department of Public Health.
So increasingly, it seems like there are teams being created in various cities and even in our county of mental health trained professionals and police and law enforcement officers to go into situations where it's suspected or known that the perpetrator has mental health concerns or is having a problem at that particular time.
Yeah.
I assume.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I can tell you from the training aspect that I'm a prime example of how training does work in these situations. Like I told you, I spent 10 plus years as they used to be called hostage negotiators. Now they're called crisis negotiators. And I went through extensive training. I had a lot of on-the-job training also, but I've had some very dangerous situations with individuals, who were bipolar or schizophrenic or had, other issues going on. And thankfully, because I recognized that early on, I was able to negotiate with them and safely resolve the situation. So there is a way for us as law enforcement to de-escalate and talk people through what sometimes is the worst, point in their life.
Mhm. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts, and I'd like now to open it up to attendees for questions. Please raise your virtual hand so that I'll know to call on you. And remember that you can ask one question per person and no speeches, please. Anybody have a question? Okay, Jim Fenton. Go for it.
Hi, thanks for introducing yourself, Chief Averiett. I've been concerned with transparency with respect to the police department, and in particular, we seem to hear a lot about certain types of crime that are committed largely by people outside Los Altos, like burglaries and so forth, and less about other, perhaps similarly serious types of crime like DUI. I wonder if you could describe kind of your approach to transparency, of course, within the bounds of privacy requirements.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that I want to bring to the table with our town hall meetings, is really providing more in-depth statistical information to our community. One of the things that we struggle with right now, when I talked about technology earlier, is that we don't have a crime analyst. We don't have a system that helps us accurately capture, all of our data. Or I shouldn't say that. We don't have a way or a person that can take the data that we do have and put it into a digestible format for us to provide to the community. So that's one of the many things that I'm trying to work on. And I agree with you that, it's a transparency issue. And it's not that we're trying to hide anything. It's just that where we are right now, we don't necessarily have the resources to accurately put that information out there. But we are definitely working on it because it's important for me to provide that information to the community. And thank you, by the way, for putting my IMDb hyperlink in the chat.
A second career, maybe.
Maybe.
Okay, any other questions?
This is Wayne Dexter. I have a comment to make. And then I think the biggest issue facing Los Altos, and don't lose sight of this, are these auxiliary dwelling units. And I can hear two people hammering on a neighbor's house right now. They're going to overwhelm our city if we go ahead and say have 100 or more little units that don't have setbacks. They're going to have parking issues, extra cars, and traffic. So I just asking you, Chief, don't lose sight of the auxiliary dwelling units are going to be a major problem in this city as we know it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Well, gosh, we may be able to end early or on time. So a few announcements before we go. Our next meeting is November 18th, also a Friday, from 8:30 to 9:30 on Zoom. The subject is downtown vitality. Where are we? Featuring our own David Rock and a panel of others. So it should be a great event. If you would like to be added to the LACC mailing list, please send an email to info@losaltoscommunitycoalition.org. This email is posted in the chat for your convenience. We also would like to thank the Los Altos Mountain View Community Foundation for providing LACC with financial and in-kind support. And many, many thanks to Larry Aaron for all he does to help make the videos available of these sessions available. on our YouTube channel. Angela, before we go, are there any final remarks that you would like to make, or final thoughts, something that we didn't cover that you think should be part of this conversation?
Yeah, I just want to just make sure that I'm very clear and clarify my earlier comments. And thank you, Marie, for pushing back, because I never, ever intend to victim shame anyone, right? I didn't get into this job to do that. I actually got into this job because I hate bullies and because I really want to serve. And I have a heart of service. And that's what I've done even before I became a police officer. I served in my community. But I just feel like we all need to do our part. We need to work together. I know I mentioned that earlier, but I really mean that. It's not law enforcement versus the community. We all, we as police officers, we actually spend more time in the communities that we work in than the communities that we live in. In a perfect world, all of our officers would live in this community. That would be great, but that's just not financially feasible, right? So a lot of our officers are commuting from different places, but they spend more time here. And so they're very actually invested in this community and seeing this community thrive and working with our residents. So I just wanted to reiterate that I love being here. It's been a great experience so far. I'm enjoying meeting everyone in the community, and I just ask to help me work with us to improve the quality of life for anyone who works, lives, and travels through our city. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And we have another question for you from Joe Beninato.
Oh, sorry. I when we had all this extra time, I just thought I'd ask, what's the one thing that has surprised you the most, Chief, in your transition into the Los Altos Police Department?
I just talked about this yesterday with one of my sergeants. My very first week here, I actually was thrown off guard by people saying hello to me and waving with all 5 fingers. I'm not used to that, which is so sad to say, but thank you, Marie. It's been such a shock to me how welcoming, like genuinely welcoming and gracious everyone has been. Sometimes I'll walk downtown and I can barely get to my destination because people are stopping and talking to me. And it's been absolutely amazing. It's been a transformative experience for me because, as I said, unfortunately, I worked in an environment that was very toxic, where people had a lot of ire towards the police, and I understand why. But having that positive feedback from the community just didn't happen as often as I wished it had. So coming here and feeling that genuine support and love internally and externally, it's been a blessing. And, I commute also from the East Bay. And even though I hate driving down 680, I smile every day when I come into work because I love working here. So that's been the biggest surprise for me, is just how welcoming, everyone has been. So I really appreciate that.
Well, we hope that continues for you and for every new city employee that joins us, because we know we need a lot of people. Back to, since we have a few minutes, back to your earlier point about police and the municipal code violation of the leaf gas blowers. And I understand your point. It came as a surprise to me at one point that it's the gardener that faces the consequences and not the homeowner. If that were changed, would that make a difference in how you think about the issue? So that the homeowner face the consequences.
Well, I actually do agree with either the homeowner or the business receiving the fine and not the individual landscaper. I mean, because I feel like that individual is really here trying to make a living, right? They're just doing their job, and maybe sometimes they can't afford, the electric leaf blowers. I don't know. But I do think it's the responsibility of the homeowner who hires the company to ensure that they have, that they're working within our municipal code. Will it change my mind as far as sending officers to that type of call? No, I don't believe that that's a law enforcement issue, even though it's a municipal code. I do believe that that's a code enforcement issue, and that should be responded to by our code enforcement personnel.
Okay. And Janine Valadez has now raised her hand.
Yeah, thanks for showing up, Chief. Really appreciate it. Learned a lot. But I do have a question, and I've kind of been stewing on it, so it took me a while to really formulate it. It had to do with as we've mentioned already, our main sources of crime are either code enforcement or theft/burglary. And for our community, and I know I'm speaking from personal experience in this, we often get, if there is a source of frustration with our PD, one that's very practical is you file a report having to do with some either property damage or burglary or something like that. And there are not enough investigative resources in the department to handle them. And you're just quite flatly told, we don't have the manpower, we can't look into that. You just talk to your insurance company, which, as you know, for a lot of people, talking to your insurance company, you could actually lose your policy if you bring up something like this to them, where you want your policy to cover damage or theft or whatever. So, when looking at the pyramid of priorities for, your added expanding your resource set, it seems to me, I'd like to hear your opinion on, trading off issues of crime prevention, crime enforcement versus just pure investigative assessment and analysis capability, in a city like ours, where that's where the main crime is. Do you have an opinion about how you prioritize your new hires or the training that you give your current officers to serve the particular crime and enforcement needs that we have in the city?
Absolutely. And that's one of the, another big lesson that I've learned coming from a larger agency to a smaller agency, right, is being very thoughtful and strategic about what type of training our officers receive. But also staffing continues to be an issue, unfortunately. So case in point, last night, we had 1 sergeant and 2 officers on duty for our entire city. So let's say we have an accident somewhere, it takes all 3 of them to respond to the accident. Well, then that means that there are no officers driving around the city being proactive. So what does that mean? Someone's car is getting broken into, someone's catalytic converter is being stolen, someone's house is being burglarized, right? So even though we're only a city of 6.5 square miles, I don't think that we have adequate police resources yet to deal with this city as it continues to grow. So as far as crime prevention is concerned, I'm working on putting together a community service officer position that will do crime prevention and emergency preparedness. And then, long-term, I'm really hoping that we can get a crime analyst, because then it will help us know where the hot spots are and where we need to focus our resources.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for being here today and for the good questions. Have a great Friday, and we hope to see you at our next meeting on November 18th.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.